we mentioned 7 characteristics of Ahlus-Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And the 7th characteristic I explained somewhat, and there's still a few issues I need to touch upon. But before I touch upon those few issues I left, can anybody remember the 7 characteristics, or at least some of the 7 characteristics? Some audience, participation from the audience. One of the 7 at least. Or is my American accent that bad? I can't understand anything. Inshallah. We said that the first issue was that Ahlus-Sunnah, that even though that they differ in terms, they have differences, disparity between them in terms of the centuries that they might live, or the regions of the earth, or in their knowledge and their adherence to Sunnah, still they have some characteristics that link them all. The first of those characteristics is that they show concern to the Book of Allah through memorization, recitation, and understanding its meanings, and towards the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by being aware of his guidance and by distinguishing what is authentically attributed to him from that which is not authentically attributed to him, and also by having the fiqh, or the understanding of his guidance. And likewise, they follow this knowledge as action. And that they believe in all the scripture, means in all of the revelation, and they enter into religion fully. And that in that matter, they follow the Prophet ﷺ, and they do not innovate. And they follow the guidance of the Salaf, and those scholars who are upon the way of the Salaf in knowledge and action. And they stay away from the way of those who innovate. But with this, they try to, even though there are innovators, this is something from Allah's qadar, they still try to unite the ranks of the Muslims. They spurn the sectarianism, they do not fall into it themselves, but they still try to unite the Muslims upon the truth and join their ranks upon Tawheed, worshipping Allah alone and believing in His names and attributes, and ittiba', following the way of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they try to keep away from the Muslims all causes which lead to their disputes between the Muslims, or to differences among the Muslims. They try to keep these causes far from the Muslims. And for this reason, in the usul, which means the fundamentals of the religion, the matters of belief, they have no other name except for Sunnah and Jama'ah. And also for this reason, they do not show al-wala, or allegiance, and likewise al-bara'ah, or disavowal, upon any bond except for that of Islam, with the non-believers, and with the Sunnah concerning the people who are from Ahlul Bidah. But amongst themselves, they do not take an issue and cause it a wala and bara between their own ranks, to split their ranks. So the issue now came, as some brothers approached me, concerning the name of Salafi. And because I mentioned that in the usul, they have no name except for Sunnah al-Jama'ah. So what does this imply? Does this mean that we cannot use the name Salafi? No. The term as-Salaf, as I explained to you, refers to those original Muslims who were upon the guidance of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the first 3 generations. And according to the Arabic language, when the ya is called ya al-nishta, is the ya at the end of a word like Salafi, or Makki, or Madani, or Masri, or something like that, it means that he's from that. So a person is a Salafi means he's from the Salaf, he's following their way. However though, so therefore these 2 terms, Salafi and Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah, are synonymous, right? They're synonymous. Synonymous in the sense that as a reality in Sharia, and synonymous also as a historical reality. If you look at the books of the ulama, you find that from the earliest times they used the term Salafi, or the Salaf, and they used to understand this to mean Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah. Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah in which sense? The specific or the general sense? Specific sense, which is Ahlul Hadith. If you said in the general sense, if a person is from Ahlus-Sunnah, then he's not a Shi'i. Whether he's following the way of the Salaf or the way of the Khalaf, whether he's a Sufi or he's following the way of Ahlul Hadith, because it doesn't mean that he's not a Shi'i, he does not revile the companions. This is the general sense of the term. But in the specific sense, we mean Ahlul Hadith. So in this case, it's synonymous with the term Salafi or Salafiyun or Salaf al-Salih. However though, this is the point I want to make clear, that if this term, even though it's from the Sharia, if it is used for partisanship, and if it's used for division, it then becomes forbidden. What's the proof, someone might ask? The proof is that during one of the Prophet's battles, a young boy from the Ansar got into an argument with a young boy from the Muhajirin. The Ansar meaning those Muslims in the city of Medina who welcomed the Prophet and the Prophet lived amongst them and was able to spread his da'wah from the city of Medina. They believed in him and supported him. That's why they were called Ansar. The Muhajirun mean those people who became Muslims in Mecca and then they made hijrah to the city of the Prophet. So the young boy from the Ansar said, "Oh Ansar," calling them to be on his side. They had some sort of fight between them. An Ansari boy and a Muhajiri boy. And the Muhajiri boy said, young man said, "Oh Muhajirin." The Prophet came out in their midst and said, "The call of Jahiliyyah, and I am between you all, meaning I'm alive and amongst you, and you're using this call of Jahiliyyah, leave it. It is something which is filthy, which is something which is despicable or hated." So here the Prophet ﷺ condemned the use of the word Ansar and the use of the word Muhajirin, even though these terms were given to them by whom? By Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even though these terms are praiseworthy in the Sharia, the Prophet ﷺ said, love of the Ansar is part of faith is love of the Ansar. And he mentioned that nobody hates the Ansar except for hypocrites. So even though the term Ansar and the term Muhajirun were given to these groups of the Muslims by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and even though it is praiseworthy for a person to be from the Muhajirin or from the Ansar, yet when the term was used not for a reason of the Sharia, you see, but reason for group partisanship, it became something disapproved of. And the Prophet ﷺ condemned it. And he said the call of Jahiliyyah, and I'm amongst your midst. So, even though it is permissible and it is praiseworthy that a person is from the Salaf, he follows the Salaf, meaning that he does not follow the Khalaf, in the sense that he follows the Sunnah, he does not follow Bid'ah. When this term is used, and this is the important point, for group partisanship, or for one's own self-desires and to promote himself or his group of Muslims, it becomes something blameworthy in the Sharia. It becomes blameworthy in the Sharia. Now, how do I now know that if the person is using it for self-promotion or if he's using it for out of a noble cause? How would I know this? There's no way to know this. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows, right? I mean, when now somebody uses the term Salaf, right? Or he uses the word Salafi or Salafiyun, do you know that if his intention is here just to promote himself or out of group partisanship, or is he doing it as a religious reality, trying to explain the merit of these people, the Salaf, and the merit of following their way? Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that man's intention. So you cannot just assume that because he's using the term, that therefore he's using it to divide the Muslims. This is a false claim, okay? But at the same time, we must understand ourselves, because when we use the term ourselves, we must always check our intention and our behavior. Are we using it out of trying to express a Sharia reality, that the way of the Salaf is the way of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the way of the Khalaf is the way against the way of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or are we using it just to identify ourselves with a certain way in order to promote ourselves? And our motivation is not truly for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everybody should check himself. I cannot enter into your heart, nor can you enter into my heart. But we must check ourselves in this matter. And this is what I wanted to bring out concerning this term. So therefore, to use the term as-Salaf, or Salafiyun, or Salafi, is praiseworthy in the Sharia. And it is like the term Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah in a specific sense. However, when it is used for group partisanship, like in this hadith, when the Ansari said, "Oh Ansar," or when the Muhajiri said, "Oh Muhajiri," in order for group partisanship, the motivation was not a matter of Sharia here. It was just because they got into a fight and he wanted his people to be on his side and so forth. Then it became blameworthy. The Prophet ﷺ said, "The call of Jahiliyyah and not amongst your midst, forsake it, for it is something which is despicable." That's concerning the term. Also, we have to understand that sometimes people who are with us, they adhere to the way of the Salaf and Aqidah, but sometimes they have a confusion concerning the use of the term of Salaf, in the sense that they say we should use the term Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah only, and not use the word the term of Salaf. And the reason why is they have some confusion between the two usages of Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah. So to understand this point, I mentioned earlier that Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah has two senses to it. A general sense, which most Muslims identify. If you ask the average Muslim on the street, are you a Sunni? Or he'll think of the term Sunni or Shi'i. That's what he understands of it. If you ask a Christian who is aware of the Muslims, like they write in the newspapers, he'll say Sunni and Shi'i. This is the general sense. And this interest in this use of Ahlus-Sunnah, even those people who are not adherents to Sunnah and beliefs, like the Ash'aris, the Maturidis, the Sufis, and so forth. In the sense that they're not Shia. However, though, in a specific sense, which is the praiseworthy sense, which is in the sense for when we come to the hadith and we say that the saved group in the Day of Judgment is Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah, and we say that the victorious group in this world is Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah, it means in the specific sense means those of Ahlul Hadith. So some people, because they don't make this distinction, they say don't use the term Salafi, don't use the term as-Salaf, but only use the term Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah, meaning by this to try to make the circle of Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah too broad, so it enters into Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah those people who are not from Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah in the specific sense, but might be from Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah in the general sense, because they're not Shia. And this is a mistake that some du'as fall into. So, while we say the two terms are interchangeable, and the usage of one term as opposed to another term depends upon the benefits gained, and also depends upon the customs of the usage of the people in your area. At the same time, we should not use Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah and abstain from using the term as-Salaf or Ahlul Hadith in order to make the circle of Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah so broad in the general sense, and therefore enters into our rank Sufis and Ash'aris and Maturidis and so forth, who are from Ahlus-Sunnah since they're not Shia. And likewise, we should not use the term as-Salaf, right, in a specific sense, Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah in a specific sense if we're using for group partisanship. when our motivation is not for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it becomes a motivation for some sort of worldly benefit that we're desiring and seeking. Like in the case of the two boys who fought, and one claimed, "Oh Ansar," and one shouted, "Oh Muhajirin." The Prophet ﷺ said, "A call of jahili, one amongst your midst." So this is the point. And I think with that, we finished the 7th point, which again, mentioning that the way that Ahlus-Sunnah characteristic is that they try to gather the Muslims upon the truth, and they try to unite the ranks of the Muslims upon Tawheed and Ittibā', and they at the same time try to push away from the Muslims any matter which is going to cause their division, or any matter which is going to cause their disagreement, and that they do not distinguish themselves with a name in the usul of the deen other than Sunnah and Jama'ah, and likewise they do not have an wala and bara, allegiance or disavowal, except upon the bond of Islam and upon the bond of the Sunnah. So we've now covered 7 characteristics, and there are 7 left which we'll do in the afternoon session. Right now we have a little bit less than an hour, 45 minutes or so, which we'd like to take some questions from the brothers and sisters. And Brother Idris will be moderating the session, so let them choose who can ask the questions, so you won't get angry at me, you'll get angry at them. The brother asked a very good question. He said, if a person is not from Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah in the specific sense, can he enter into paradise? And this question appears because when we say that the saved group is Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah, does this mean that we're implying that everybody else will be in the hellfire who's not from Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah in the specific sense? I believe I answered this question when I was here in August when we did the lectures about Aqidah Wasatiyya, but if I did not, or if the brother wasn't there during those lectures, I will now repeat the answer. Ibn Taymiyyah was asked this question, because when he wrote his Aqidah Wasatiyya, as many of you might know, in the year 705, the scholars, who were the evil scholars of his time, tried to see him in prison and tried to stop him from giving da'wah. So what they did was they complained to the Sultan of the Muslims at the time in Egypt that this man is causing much fitna and corrupting the beliefs of the Muslims. So they had a debate that lasted for 3 sessions in the year 705 with Ibn Taymiyyah. And one of the complaints they accused Ibn Taymiyyah that he had false beliefs and he was of evil beliefs. So Ibn Taymiyyah said, let me bring out from my house an essay which I wrote, which was the Aqidah Wasatiyya, which I wrote 8 years ago. So since I wrote this thing 8 years ago, you will not think that I'm going to say something now in agreement with you just so that I won't get in trouble. But this is something I wrote 8 years ago. Send somebody to my house, pull out a copy, and this copy is well spread in the Islamic world. And from this, you can see my beliefs, and we'll discuss it from this issue. So one of the issues they brought up was that because Ibn Taymiyyah in his opening paragraph, he says this is the creed, هذا اعتقاد الفرقة الناجية الطائفة المنصورة أهل السنة والجماعة. So this is the belief, a compendium of the belief of the saved group, the victorious group, Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah. So one of his opponents from the Ash'ari saying, do you mean by this that if we disagree with you in some of these points in Aqidah, then we will be in the hellfire? Ibn Taymiyyah said, no. This is the point that I want you to understand. He said, if you are following the Sunnah, then you are protected, you're saved. But if you do not follow the Sunnah, you're under the threat of Allah's punishment. Now, we know that Allah might forgive you, or He might punish you. And likewise, you might have other good qualities that will remove this sin, like having much good deeds, or that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might have tested you in this world with some hardship, some illness, or poverty, or something. Or, for instance, that you might also have, in the hereafter, you might receive the shafa'ah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There are about 11 ways, 10 or 11 ways in which the punishment for a sin can be removed. Okay? Of course, Tawbah is the first of them, and then good deeds, and having some sort of hardship, the intercession of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or just the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَيَغْفِرْ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَن يَشَاءُ. He forgives any other sin besides that, besides shirk, to whoever He will. And bid'ah being one of those sins, because bid'ah is less than shirk. Of course, there are some bid'ahs that throw you out of the fold of Islam. That's a different story. So therefore, our rule is that those groups which are not from Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah, there are 2 types. There are sects which are outside of the fold of Islam, even though they claim that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. An example would be the Qadianis. They are outside of the fold of Islam, because they believe there is a prophet after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And likewise, another example would be, I'm trying to think of an example, those extremist Shias, like the Druze, or the Nusayris, or the Ismailis. And there are other groups, like the Batini, for instance. These are outside of the fold of Islam. So they are not part of the 73 groups. They are murtadun. They are disbelievers, apostates. Within the 73 groups, there's one group which is upon the Sunnah, and there are other 72 groups. Those people from the other 72 groups are under Allah's threat of punishment. But will they be punished or not? Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. Because he might have good deeds which will wipe away the punishment. Or he might have been suffered in this world, some sort of suffering because of his being away from the Sunnah. Allah punished him in this world, gave him some sort of sickness or some sort of hardship, poverty. Or in the hereafter, the Prophet might intercede for him. Or he might just receive the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we cannot say definitely that these people are in the hellfire. Just like the person who commits illicit sex outside of marriage. Did not the Prophet say that in his Isra, he saw men and women who were naked and they were boiling in cauldrons, and he asked Jibreel, who are these people? And he said, they are the ones who have sex outside of marriage. Does this mean that everybody who in this ummah who has this sin of having sex outside of marriage, he will be punished in the day of judgment? What is the aqidah of Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah concerning this? Huh? Does anybody know? Huh? No, if you repent, of course the sin is removed. But if you don't repent and you die from this sin, does that mean he'll definitely be punished? We don't know. But we fear for him, because he died upon a major sin. And Allah has promised and warned that he will punish for this major sin. So there is a great fear in our hearts that because he died on that major sin, or she died on that major sin, they will be taken to the hellfire. Even though that they will eventually make it to paradise because of their Islam, because of their Iman. So likewise, a person who follows in a stray group, okay, we fear for him if he dies like that he'll be taken to the hellfire. But can we be certain that he'll be taken to the hellfire? No, only Allah knows. The second issue is that, which I want to bring there, even though it relates to your question, even though it was not expressing the question, is that don't forget that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only judges the people according to what knowledge they have received. So in times when the sunnah is gharib, it's unknown, and the people of the sunnah are few, the responsibilities of the people of that time are less. In the sense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not judge them upon the same scale as those people who were there when there was an abundance of knowledge. And that's why, for instance, we find Abu Hanifa, just as a worldly application of this rule. Abu Hanifa said, he who does not know that if Allah is upon the throne or not, or says he does not know where Allah's throne is, in the heavens, above the heavens or on earth, he's a kafir. But yet Ibn Taymiyyah, who quotes Abu Hanifa saying this, says that he came across the people from the Jahmiyyah and Hululiyah. And Hululiyah means that they believe that Allah is everywhere. And Ibn Taymiyyah said to them, if I was to say what you would say, I would be a kafir. But you are not kuffar in front of me, because you have no knowledge. So the point is, in times when the sunnah is unknown, and knowledge of the way of the Prophet is unknown, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not show any injustice to the creation. And therefore, he will not hold them to that same scale as he will when the sunnah was prevalent. However though, if the sunnah is unknown because it wasn't available, but if the sunnah was unknown because they could care less to follow it, and they could care less if they wanted to follow the way the Prophet or not, then they're held responsible, because they showed no initiative. But if they tried their best to obey Allah and obey the Prophet Muhammad, and yet nobody explains to them the correct belief in Qadr, and so he had some Qadri view, does that make him all of a sudden, we rank him as those people who were in the time of Ibn Umar, and the Sahaba refuted their views, and they insisted upon it? Of course not. And likewise, in the day of judgment, they'll be different, they won't be judged in the same way. So the point is that those people who adhere to any group other than Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah, and are within the fold of Islam, not those sects which are apostates, like the Qadianis and the Ismailis and so forth, and the Druze. These groups are under the threat of punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as a result, they might go to the hellfire if they don't repent. But then again, they might have good deeds which will wipe out that. Like they might have done jihad to defend Islam, and they fought until they died in the battlefield. Allah might, by this great deed, might forgive them. Or they might have had charity or prayer. Or they might have, because they didn't adhere to Sunnah and they were negligent, Allah might have punished them in this world with some harsh punishment that will be an expiation for that sin, whether that punishment is illness or death or whatever that punishment might be, poverty. And likewise, they might gain the intercession of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he forgives anything to whom he pleases. He just might forgive them on the day of judgment and enters them into paradise. Okay, so our point is, in final thing, that we say that they're under the threat of punishment, therefore we fear for them, and he calls it Sunnah. No one knows that. No. Question? The sister, or the brother or the question. Sister, when you say stay away from the people, not to the Salaf or Bid'ah, do not read their books, listen to their speeches, or read their works, do you apply this to Muslim works, etc., from other schools of thought? And in each of these schools of thought were to say the same thing, I do not read, listen to other works, how would a Muslim belong to these different schools of thought, be guided to the right path of the true way? This is a very good question. May Allah reward the questioner. The point is, we said that if we agree that the way of the Prophet ﷺ is the truth, and we have been guided to the truth, and therefore we have no reason to investigate into falsehood. I mean, if you're in doubt of the truth, then you might want to go and investigate into falsehood. Just like now, would you say as a Muslim, well, why don't you go to church tomorrow and just listen? Because you don't know. I mean, maybe Jesus is the Son of God. No Muslim would say that. Because he's certain in his heart. He has yaqeen. Not just knowledge, he has certainty in his heart. He has that Allah has no son. And therefore, he It has no reason to go to that. Okay? And likewise, matters of the Sunnah. If you are certain that the Prophet ﷺ's companions are upon the truth, and that, even though they were not infallible from sin and error, but yet that they were the best of mankind, and they spread the religion of Islam after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, do you need to now travel to Iran to investigate the Shia method and say, well, let me do a year of study of whom, just to make sure, because maybe there's a chance that Abu Bakr and Umar, ma'azallah, were upon falsehood? No. But this is different from the issues in which the ulama have difference upon, and they are all ulama Ahlus-Sunnah wal Jama'ah. For instance, let's just say a brother traveled to Arabia and he studied fiqh. And he studied fiqh with the scholars of Arabia, basically Hanbali in their madhab. And so he studies the books of fiqh like Ibn Qudama and Mughni. Okay, and he studies the scholars of Islam until he reaches a certain stage of knowledge. Do you say to him now, don't read Al-Majmu', which is a book in Shafi'i, he says by now because you studied Hanbali? Of course not. Because this is a matter in which the scholars of Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah themselves have different concerning certain matters of which jihad between them. So here, a person should seek knowledge, and he should try to learn from as many scholars as possible who are Muslims upon the way of the Sunnah Jama'ah. Because there are men, they might err in their ijtihad, or they might forget, or they might make a mistake. So the point is that the term school of thought is so much vague as to what the system implies. If this is to imply schools of thought, the madhahib which are well known in matters of fiqh, like the Hanafi and the Shafi'i, the Maliki and the Hanbali fiqh, then this is not my intent. But if he means by schools of thought, those madhahib which are outside of the fold of Sunnah, like the Shia, or like the Ash'ari, or like the Maturidis and so forth, then obviously you should not read that thing, unless you're a scholar. Or a student of knowledge who has reached enough knowledge that the scholars say that you can, investigate into these books. Because the point is, if you do not have the Sharia knowledge, you might be confused. And how many brothers and sisters have you met who, because they don't know anything about Islam, sometimes when Christians come to them, they're somewhat confused concerning basic things that we take for granted, like, is Jesus the Son of God or not? And many times I have come across Muslims, so young men, who are confused concerning this issue because they don't know anything about Islam, even though they're Muslims from Muslim families, and yet they come in contact with people who are Christians, and therefore they have some sort of confusion. So likewise, if this is concerning clear matters like that, what about those matters which are somewhat confusing for some people? Like the issue, are the actions of man part of the creation of Allah, or does man create his own actions? You should know what the people of the Sunnah say, and hold firm to that, and not try to investigate the books of the people who differ from the people of Sunnah concerning matters of belief like Qadr. And inshallah ta'ala, that answers the question. We have another question here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What is the characteristic of the Ahlus-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the ulama, scholars, to make takfir? If yes, is it halal for the common folk, that is me or anyone with knowledge is to a little extent, but not enough to make takfir, as we take an example from the scholars? No. You should know that a takfir is one of the rules of the Sharia. One of the rules of the Sharia. And therefore it has conditions that must be fulfilled. And likewise, it has what they call mawani', or obstacles that must be removed before the ruling of takfir is applied. And also, just because a person does an act of kufr doesn't mean that he's a kafir necessarily. Because of those issues, the conditions that must be fulfilled and the obstacles that must be removed. I'll give you an example. For instance, like the incident I related about Ibn Taymiyyah, when he said to those people who believe in Allah everywhere, he said that if you have knowledge, okay, you would be kuffar, but since you do not have knowledge, you're not a kafir. If I was to believe like you believe, I would be a kafir. Now, one of the most conditions that must be removed is ignorance. In the sense that if somebody does something of kufr, he does not become a kafir if he's ignorant that it's kufr. He doesn't become a kafir if he's ignorant that it's kufr, because until the knowledge reaches him. Likewise, if he misunderstands and he makes some sort of ta'wil facet, a misinterpretation of the Quran and Sunnah, we do not necessarily call him a kafir because of that. So since takfir is one of the rules of Sharia, only the ulama should pronounce takfir. Only the ulama should pronounce takfir. And the common folk of the Muslims should not pronounce takfir. Because it's a very dangerous ruling. You read the Prophet in the hadith of Ibn Umar, reported by Muslim and others, that whoever says to his brother, meaning his fellow Muslim, Ya kafir, O kafir, it has fallen upon one of them. Meaning that if he's not a kafir, it has returned back to you. So one should not engage in takfir. But what we should engage in is knowing what are the nawaqid in Islam. What are the things which are causes of apostasy. So that we do not fall into that. You see what I'm saying? If a person makes shirk, we cannot call him a kafir. The ulama should make the judgment if he's a kafir or not. However, though, we should know that shirk is one of the causes of apostasy, so that we do not fall into that. Okay? We have to know that if you make fun of anything with the Islamic religion, or its reward, or its punishment, or the Prophet ﷺ, that this is kufr. But if we find somebody making a joke, We cannot call him a kafir. This is for the ulama to do, not for us to do. But we should know that this is kufr, so we do not fall into that. Okay? And inshallah ta'ala, that's an answer to the question. Is that awesome?
Right. I have recently spoken to the Sayyid myself. They have denied that you, Prophet has come. I do believe that the Mahdi and Isa ibn Maryam have come to deserve. What do you believe that was according to the
As far as the Qadiani, the question was that the Qadiani says whether a person Qadiani who does not say there's a prophet after Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but they say that the Ghulam Ahmed was just the Mahdi and the Isa combined together. What do you consider them? Both groups, the Qadianis are two groups. Those who identify Ghulam Ahmed as a prophet, and those who do not identify him as a prophet, I think they're called the Lahoris amongst them, and say that he's a Mujaddid, and they say that he's the Mahdi and he's Isa. The ulama of Islam have declared that both groups are kuffar, and that it's just a play on words from the second group. And if you'd like, refer to the book by Yassan Ilahi Zahir, Qadianiyat, and also another book is This is Qadianism, which was printed by I believe Muslim World League, perhaps they read some for it to you. That then explains that that both groups are kuffar. So the ulama have agreed upon it. References what our position is. Why exactly the reason for that, I don't recollect at this time.
Can you comment on the Sheikh Nazim and the Naqshband and Tariqat, whether they differ with the Sunnah in any way?
No, as far as Sheikh Nazim and the Naqshbandiya, I don't know Sheikh Nazim particularly, and I have only read a few of their works from their Jama'ah. But I can tell you about the Sufis in general and the Naqshbandiya being part and parcel from them. The Sufis of today, the Sufis of our century, in the few centuries preceding us, try to pass off their claims and their madhab by identifying themselves with classical scholars of Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah who are known for their piety and their zuhd, among which is Ma'ruf al-Karhi, or Sahl al-Tustari, or Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, and others. Okay, these men were scholars of Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah who were known for their piety during their time. Now, the Sufism which is practiced today is a sea of filth, because it has gathered in the framework of their beliefs and in the framework of their practice every sort of creative disbelief that you might imagine on the face of the earth. For instance, in belief of Allah, you find the Sufis of today, irrespective of the tariqah, whether it's Tijani or other, they identify the creation with Allah. They believe in one universal existence. Okay, this is being the belief of Ibn Arabi, which is called Wahdat al-Wujud. And likewise, sometimes they believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala incarnates into certain of them. They believe in hulul. These are beliefs of disbelief, and neither Ma'ruf al-Karhi or al-Junayd or Abdul Qadir al-Jilani believes in this. I mean, Junayd said that Tawheed is to distinguish between he who is eternal and he who is not eternal, meaning to distinguish between the creator and the created. And that's why these Sufis who believe in Wahdat al-Wujud call al-Junayd, who's considered the Sheikh, the Imam of the Sufiya, they consider him a kafir outside the fold of Islam. Likewise, we find that concerning the Prophet ﷺ, they believe that they can reach a rank higher than the Prophet in general, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And they say, for instance, as they quote against Bayezid al-Bistami, that he said, we have traversed the sea which the Prophets have only stopped at its shore. Concerning the awliya, we believe that there's awliya, as I explained in the Durus, Aqid Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah, Aqid al-Wasatiyah, that Allah blesses certain men and He gives them karamah as either a need that they need to help them, or either as a proof, because these people were from the Sunnah, and therefore to show the truth of the Sunnah. They believe that the awliya can control the universe and do whatever they want, and that they can control, people's lives and deaths. As one of them quotes in a book of theirs, he said that one of the awliya said that I have not said kun fayakun, being it is, for the last 20 years out of respect for Allah. Meaning that if he wanted to, he could do it. And these are beliefs of kufr. Likewise, they think that to seek paradise or to flee from the hellfire is a fault, and that rather the salaf, or the one who's upon the road, should seek al-fana, which means to unite with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise, in their acts of worship, you find each of them has his own sharia. Each of them has his own way of dhikr. Each of them has his own way of worship. His own clothes that he tells his followers to wear. His own foods that they tell to eat, or acts of worship. And they base this upon dreams, upon meetings they say they have with the Khidr, upon the spirits, they say they're in contact with the spirits, which mean the jinns in this case, and so forth. So really, if you look at Sufism, as it is practiced today by the different tariqas, it is completely different than the understanding of at-Tasawwuf, which was practiced in the time of the earlier Muslims. And that's why, and this is a benefit for the brothers, that when you hear or you read something, you have to understand the context in which it's used. Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah, in his great book called Al-Kafiyah Shafiyah, في انتصار الفرقة الناجية, which means that which is sufficing and that which is sufficient in giving victory to the faith. That is about 5,000 lines of poetry, which is known as also Mimiyah Ibn al-Qayyim, which describes the Aqidah. He said that Ahlus-Sunnah is Sunniyah Sufiyah, that they are Sunnis and Sufis. But he didn't mean Sufis in terms of these willing dervishes who run around and do these types of things. But he meant the sense that they were people of piety like the earlier Muslims. Okay? Now he comes specifically to this Naqshbandi thing. So first I'll give you one of the karamat of a Naqshband, and you decide if this is upon the way of the Prophet ﷺ or not. The Sheikh of a Naqshband is reported to have told Naqshband himself, who he appeared in the Middle Ages, this gentleman, that he should be very humble, which is good to be humble in Islam, and even humble with the animals, okay? So much so that that Naqshband himself, he took this advice to the fullest, that if you see a dog pass the road, he would hold up and he would not let the dog, cut the dog off, let the dog have right of the way first, out of his modesty. And then one day he was going forth, and a dog fell on his back and raised his 4 legs up to the sky and started to make dua and started to tell Sheikh Naqshband to say Ameen. And so then the Sheikh Naqshband himself sought to tawassul, the intercession of the dog with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is considered one of the greatest karamat of Sheikh Naqshband. Can this way be the way of the Prophet ﷺ, that you start now speaking? We condemn people who seek the intercession of the dead righteous Muslims, like the Prophet, like Isa ibn Maryam, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, or those who seek the intercession of the Prophet's companions, like Ali al-Shia and so forth. What about seeking the intercession of a dog? And is this a karamat which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would give a man for following the sunnah, that he would make a dog fall on his back and raise his legs up to the sky and say Ameen after I make dua, and then the man would then do so, and then after the man was overcome in tears, he said, oh Allah, I intercede through you by the dog and so forth. This is obviously against the sunnah. So this just shows you, and they relate this in their book as one of the karamat of Sheikh Naqshband. And what comes after that is even worse. So, this individual himself, Sheikh Nazim, I don't know who he is. I never met him, nor have I read any of his work. But I've met some of his followers in the United States, and I've seen some of their literature. And as usual, it is filled with inaccuracies and deviations from the Sharia. But even if this was, not the case, we know that if they were from the truth, they wouldn't adhere to a man who prayed to a dog in the first place. And Allah knows that. Okay, assalamu alaikum wa alaikum salam. Concerning the name Ahlus-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, in the specific and in the Salafiyah, when does a person know if he or she has entered into this group of people, or does he or she ever know? So what knowledge and understanding is required to enter into this group, or does just one have to hope to be with this group? Obviously, when we say Ahlus-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, or following the Salaf, we don't just mean in matters of belief, although we start in matters of belief, right? We mean the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is as Suwayd bin Iyad said, when he was asked, what is the characteristic of Ahlus-Sunnah wal Jama'ah? He said, it is to know what you've entered into your stomach. Is it halal or is it haram? Meaning that the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ doesn't just influence on belief, because if you are so concerned what you put in your belly, if it's halal or not, you'd be more concerned what goes into your ears or goes into your heart, if it's correct, truth or falsehood. So the Sunnah, we shouldn't understand just the Sunnah just to be just matters of belief, but rather it is one's life. And therefore, we need to be from Ahlus-Sunnah wal Jama'ah in belief, in worship, in our behavior, in giving da'wah. But at the same time, if we err, or if we make a sin, it doesn't necessarily mean we're outside of the Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Okay? It means that we have fallen short in that aspect. We are sinful or we are wrong in that aspect. And therefore, our adherence to Sunnah wal Jama'ah is not complete. It is less in that aspect. Likewise, however, though, when we have a false belief, we can say that we're not from Ahlus-Sunnah wal Jama'ah. For example, we revile the Prophet's companions. We know for a certain that we're not from the Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So there's no way you can say, when do I become fully from Ahlus-Sunnah wal Jama'ah? I mean, that means that you fully follow the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. But what you need to do is you need to obey the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and understand Islam as the earliest Muslims understood, and work in your life to that. This is what is called tarbiyah or tazkiyah, purifying the soul, in the sense that when you learn that you're doing something which is sinful, you leave that sin, you make tawbah immediately. And when you know that you have some sort of misconception, you correct that misconception and you learn that issue. And so forth. And as you grow older in your life, you come in front of more knowledge and more experiences, and therefore you are always modifying your behavior and your work to try to reach as much perfection as possible. But however though, the key to following the way of Ahlus-Sunnah wal Jama'ah is the belief. And that's why we should spend time knowing Tawheed. This is the first step, as it is the final step. And for this reason Allah has created us. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I have not created jinn or men except to worship me. This is why Allah has sent the Prophet. وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا أَنْ يَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَيَجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ. We have sent to every single community a messenger saying worship Allah alone and avoid the Taghut. And Allah knows best. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Regarding what you mentioned about practicing what we preach, commanding the good while practicing it ourselves? How do we go about advising someone who's perhaps more knowledgeable than ourselves if we see them back, biting, lying, when we may not necessarily acting upon our own advice? Is this hypocritical to do so? If we do not, are we going against the command to enjoy the good and forbid the evil? Right. There's two things which have to be distinguished over here. You will never find a person, if somebody says, I'm not going to give dawah, or I'm not going to command good or forbid evil, or I'm not going to advise somebody until I am sinless, then you'll never give dawah, and you'll never command good or forbid evil, and you'll never advise anyone. But rather, one should avoid talking about those matters that she does not practice. You see what I'm saying? And one should not, just like you didn't talk about those matters that she has no knowledge on. For instance, you're not a scholar, I'm not a scholar. But if somebody is a new Muslim and asks me, how do I make wudu? Do I say, well, I'm not a scholar, I can't teach you? I show him how to make wudu. But if he asks me, for instance, what is the economic system of Islam? How does Islam look for insurance? And I don't know what the ruling of the Sharia is concerning this matter. I say, Allah knows that. Let's go ask a scholar and investigate this matter. Likewise, in commanding good or forbidding evil, one should avoid teaching and encouraging people for things that he knows he does sinfulness in. But at the same time, those matters that she's not sinful in, and he's applying, there's no harm in advising somebody in that matter. And likewise, advising those people who are more knowledgeable than you or who are older than you, there's no harm. However, though, one has to understand that if somebody is more knowledgeable than you, or if someone is older than you, there's a specific way of approaching them. And that is approaching them very gently. Because you have to show respect to them, you see what I'm saying? And sometimes if you approach them in the wrong way, you don't show respect, and as a result, the message is lost, okay? Or you ask somebody who is knowledgeable and so forth to come and express that to him, his same level, his same age, for instance, and his same maybe level of knowledge and so forth. So these are just a few advices concerning that, and Allah knows that. Okay, it says much of the dawah in Britain is being propagated in a comparative methodology. This leads many of the callers of Islam studying alternative religions. This leads many of the callers of Islam to study alternative religions when their knowledge of the deen is little, and as they're unaware of the correct aqidah, etc. Their dawah literature is also geared in that direction, that is Islam versus Christianity, references to the Bible as confirmation regarding Islam. Is this the correct approach? Please verify. Well, we should understand that making comparisons between truth and falsehood is the methodology of the Quran. Allah in the Quran says, فَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالطَّاغُوتِ وَيُؤْمِنْ بِاللَّهِ. He who disbelieves in Taghut and believes in Allah. And the Prophet ﷺ said that he is firaq, that he is faraq, that he's the one who separates between the people, okay? And Allah has described his book as Furqan, which means he separates between truth and falsehood. So the comparison of truth and falsehood is the methodology of the Quran, the methodology of the Sunnah, and it's also the methodology of the earlier Muslims. As Hudayfa said, the people used to ask the Prophet ﷺ about good, and I used to ask him about the evil because I was afraid that I might fall into it. So this is the comparison is one of the best ways. This is the way you find the Quran usually expressing the truth. However, though, the second part of the question is that when somebody is studying Islam, should his emphasis be and wants to preach Islam, should he study more about the Bible before he studies Islam? This is where the harm comes. Okay, you find many brothers, and mashallah, it's about Allah. He can quote you Saint Gospel and Gospel of St. John and St. Luke and so forth. He knows all these facts about the Christians. But yet, when you ask him to explain La ilaha illallah, he can't. He's unable to do that. This is the harm. This is not what is required. First, you have to study Islam. And when you know Islam, then you begin studying the other matters, like different groups and different sects and so forth. So the first part is you study Islam. And then when you reach the level of studying Islam, that you have a firm handhold, then you start beginning to study the groups. And also, the other thing is that you don't need to make new research concerning most of these groups and most of these religions. The ulama of Islam have already written concerning that. So it suffices you as a student of knowledge to see what the earlier scholars wrote and just, package it for your society and your time. No one knows that.
What's the approach to start we should have with others with regard to when we are trying to get verification from the ulama? Some of us would use or approach particular types of scholars to verify a particular point, and when it's not fitting to the answer that we require, to go elsewhere. Now we know that that the deen does not contradict itself. And sometimes we have brothers coming with this scholar's point of view and bringing another scholar's point of view, and where there would apparently be a clash, but due to the lack of understanding that the brothers have themselves, it appears to be a clash, and that causes dissension.
Okay, so in summary for the sisters, the brothers asking about, some brothers taking one opinion and taking another opinion from another scholar, and sometimes this brings a clash of opinions and some sort of differences, even though this is not really part of Islam. And you have to understand that the issues of Islam are two types. There are those issues which are clear-cut, and there is no doubt concerning the truth and the falsehood with it. And this, all the scholars of Ahlus-Sunnah are dealing to. And there are those issues which are matters of ijtihad. And in matters of ijtihad, one should not necessarily make an issue of ijtihad an issue of wala and bara. In the sense that if those people who follow that matter of ijtihad in agreement with him are therefore the true Ahlus-Sunnah, and those who disagree with him are not. No. But rather, both groups, the possibility that they could be correct or the possibility that they could be wrong. And therefore, the one who's correct has 2 rewards, and the one who's incorrect has 1 reward. So, what we do is, in this case, if we become certain that one ijtihad is correct, we follow that. But at the same time, we show mercy towards those, because we know that they are being rewarded Allah for their ijtihad. As opposed to those issues which are clear-cut, and there's an ijma' on it. Then there's this case, we should not tolerate differences. You see what I'm saying? So, this is the problem. The problem comes not because brothers ask scholars, and he wants to ask the scholar because he feels more comfortable with him, or he knows him better, as opposed to asking another scholar. The problem comes when the brothers and sisters don't understand the methodology of dealing with differences in Islam. So there are those differences which are blameworthy, and there are those differences which are, we won't say necessarily praiseworthy, but in both groups are rewarded. Those who are correct get 2 rewards, and those who are incorrect have 1 reward. And also because, the other issue is because al-hawa, following one's whims and desires. He wants to find the opinion which agrees with what he wants to do, not necessarily if that's the truth or not in this matter of ijtihad. And this is something which everybody has to work on himself. Ikhlas, and freeing oneself from one's desires and whims, that he's only seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his question and in his application of that answer. And so it's a question of knowledge, and exposure is a question of ikhlas. And if one trains himself, that he understands the methodology of when is a difference accepted and when it's not accepted, and also tries to free himself from following his whims, and however tries to have ikhlas, then inshallah the differences will become less. And it's all holy.
You mentioned about taking people observation from their books, reading their books and all.
Yeah.
How do we, because the books available in English was so limited in terms of the correct understanding, how do we, what sort of methodology can we use to find out which scholars are speaking from the correct point of view, or not?
So the brother's question was that I mentioned that Qudama said that is the way that Ahlus-Sunnah we do not read the books or listen to the words of people of innovation. So since we have so limited type of literature in the English language, which is upon the Sunnah, then therefore how should we act in this case? We have to understand that first of all, in terms of reading books and so forth, that there are people who are from the Sunnah who can guide us in which books to read and not to read. Okay? And second of all, that books are an issue of qualitative, as an issue, say, in the sense that some books might have some mistakes in it, but yet overall it's good. So therefore, if there's nothing else which can solve that issue, we tell the people to read that book, because there's nothing else for them to read. But more importantly, we need to learn the Arabic language. I mean, if we want to understand Islam truly, and we want to adhere to the way of Ahlus-Sunnah truly, we need to learn the Arabic language. That is the key. I mean, one should remove from himself ignorance in the most general sense. Also, you should be thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that there are some books in the English language which you can spend much time reading, and if you read throughout your life, it would suffice you probably. Among which is Sahih al-Bukhari in the English language. And this translation usually has some faults in it. In general, the translation which is accurate or agrees with the general intent of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And likewise, the translation of the Quran, meanings of the Quran done by the 2 sheikhs themselves, Taqiyuddin Hilali and Muhammad Hussain Khan. And there's a lot of information in that. And if the brothers, would read and study that and so forth, they would benefit greatly. And at the same time, learn the Arabic language. So the point is that the key starts with learning Arabic. I encourage all of you to try to learn as much Arabic as possible. And then afterwards, asking those people who have preceded you in knowledge and to the way of the Sunnah, if you have a book, is this book useful or not? And if there's nothing else on the subject, what should I do? And Allah Ta'ala knows best. Okay.
I was wondering, there's something that one brother said to me about what Imam al-Bayhaqi said with respect to Shibr al-Iman and Iman al-Faith. I'm basically somebody I know puts doubt on, for example, Aqidah al-Tahawiyah, the practical work on Aqidah al-Ahlus-Sunnah. I was wondering, could you, some Greek scholars, who did say, who did verify this Aqidah al-Ahlus-Sunnah, and also to clarify what Imam al-Bayhaqi, the kind of criticize Imam al-Tahawi on something, was it on the approach to Hadith?
No, he's not right. As far as the criticism between al-Bayhaqi and al-Tahawi, I don't recollect exactly the issue, if one existed or what the issue was. However, though, if somebody said that al-Bayhaqi and al-Tahawi disagree or had some differences between them, I wouldn't find that difficult. And the reason why is because both of them were adherents to Judaism madhab. Imam al-Tahawi was Hanafi in his fiqh, and Imam al-Bayhaqi was Shafi'i in his fiqh. And sometimes, as a result, the scholars, when they adhere to a madhab, sometimes they would fall into some type of jealousy, and it would lead them to speak harshly against one another, okay? And this is something which is known by the ulama of Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah, and that's why they have a rule that the words of contemporaries are not accepted concerning one another. I mean, when scholars of Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah criticize one another, their contemporaries, we don't accept what they say concerning one another. We refer to the judgment of those who come after them, who won't have any jealousy, because as men, I mean, and they're not, I mean, when we say they're scholars of Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah, we do not mean that they're sinless or that they are free from any fault, but rather they can occur sins to them, they can occur faults to them, but however, they're the best of mankind. And that any fault or any sin which occurs to them is quite literal in terms of their great knowledge and their great piety. So it's not uncommon, for instance, we find that the people of Medina did not like Ibn Ishaq, the great biographer of the Prophet. Why? What's the reason why? One of the scholars of Medina, his wife was also a scholar. Okay? And Ibn Ishaq took from her some hadith. Ibn Ishaq took from her some hadith. And he said, I believe her name was Fatima, he said, I took from Fatima this hadith. This man became jealous that somebody spoke to his wife. So he said, by Allah, he didn't see my wife. Yes, Ibn Ishaq did not say that he saw your wife. All he said, he heard from her this hadith. And it was well known that even in the time of Aisha, they would come and ask her questions, and there would be some sort of partition between her and them. So the Tabi'in would ask her, so the Sahaba would ask her questions, they would not see her. But at the same time, they would hear from her. And Imam al-Zahabi was relating the story that I have a number who taught me, who I never saw them, but I learned from them some points of Islam. So, you see, this man, because when the man said in public, I heard this hadith from his wife, he was enraged. You see what I'm saying? Oh, this guy is talking to my wife, you know what I'm saying? So he said, by Allah, this man did not see my wife. By Allah, this man did not see my wife. But Ibn Ishaq did not say that he saw his wife. He said, oh, I heard from his wife. You see, so both of them were truthful. When this occurred, the scholars of Medina then thought of Ibn Ishaq as a liar, because this other scholar from Medina said this, so they considered him a liar. So therefore, we find scholars like Imam Malik saying, oh, Ibn Ishaq was a liar. We're not going to take anything from him. Although he was not a liar. He never lied against the Prophet ﷺ, but because it received them some information, okay? So if there was a difference between the Bayhaqi and the Tahawi, who are, not necessarily contemporaries, but of the same period in general, it doesn't surprise me, because they were on two different, al-Bayhaqi is known as the person who pushed the Shafi'i method really in the Islamic world, and the Tahawi is one who really pushed the Hanafi method. And even the Tahawi himself, he was originally a Shafi'i. I mean, his maternal uncle, al-Muzani, was one of Imam Shafi'i's greatest students. Okay, and one time in class, his uncle who was teaching him fiqh, said something to him like, you'll never understand anything. And he was a kid, you know what I'm saying, a young man. So he got so kicked off, he left that circle. He said, okay, I'm going to study with the students of Abu Hanifa. Because, his uncle was a little bit harsh with him. So, so these things do occur, and if you read the seerah of the ulama, you find that these things happen, but that does not mean, if they made these mistakes, that we drop them and we disregard their knowledge and their piety. They were meant, you see what I'm saying? And that's why we do not say that any scholar himself, neither a Tahawi, or al-Bayhaqi, or Ibn Taymiyyah, or Ahmed, any person, neither Abu Bakr or Umar, radiallahu anhuma, in everything they said and did, were 100% right. Only Muhammad ﷺ has this virtue. And the rest of them, they fall in the balance of the words and the deeds of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that which agrees and that which doesn't agree. Now, the interesting thing is that, those people who try to push al-Bayhaqi, okay, and I know that al-Bayhaqi, for example, I haven't read Shu'ab al-Iman, I read the abridged version, not the original version, which is many volumes, but he has a book called al-I'tiqad al-Bayhaqi, right? And al-Bayhaqi has some ta'weel. He has some ta'weel in the attributes. He says that he explains away through the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, like Ibn al-Jawzi, who's one of the Hanbali scholars that came afterwards, those modern-day Ash'ari try to push al-Bayhaqi and Ibn al-Jawzi and others of their scholarship as a shield for their beliefs. Just like the Sufis try to attach allegiance to al-Junayd and to Abdul Qadir al-Jilani and Sahal al-Tustari, even though they're not following them. Most of the Ash'aris today are Jahmis. They are not Ash'aris. They're not really Ash'aris. Most of them today are Jahmis. And therefore, they use these scholars as a shield, because we find one of the greatest nemesis against Ibn Taymiyyah, who was Taqiyuddin al-Subki. Okay, he said that the ulama have all gathered that the Aqid of Imam Tahawi is the representative of the Aqid of Islam. Okay, so what they try to do is, because they're trying to fight against the Aqidah of Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah in a specific sense, the Aqidah of the Salaf, they try to use this as a ruse, and they try to bring up al-Bayhaqi and Ibn al-Jawzi. They quote Ibn al-Jawzi, for instance, that when he criticizes those people who we call like Salafis today of his time, and he makes ta'wil of some attributes of Allah. But yet, why do they not quote Ibn Jawzi when he attacks the Ash'ari? You see what I'm saying? They quote Ibn Hajar when it's useful for them, right? But why don't they quote Ibn Hajar or Nawawi when they say that the book Al-Ibana is the creed of Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari himself? And Nawawi wrote the book down by his own handwriting. So they selectively choose the statements of the ulama which, fit in their guides and so on. Just like the Sufis selectively try to attribute themselves to these pious men of the early centuries, the earliest Sufis. And just like the Shia selectively try to say that they're following Ahlul Bayt like Ja'far al-Sadiq and Muhammad al-Baqir and Zayn al-Abidin, even though they're far from them. So I agree that, and also Aqidah Tahawiyah in general follows the Aqidah of Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah, but there are some points like in the issues of Iman in which he's erred and he doesn't follow the beliefs of Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah, as the commentators have brought out, whether it's Ibn Abi al-Izz's classical commentary or those people who've written smaller glosses upon the creed today. So what I'm trying to say is that if a difference occurred between them, I don't find that surprising, even though I don't know if it's different myself. I'm ignorant. And that don't be fooled that sometimes people try to use these names like Ibn Jawzi and Bayhaqi selectively, like the Sufis use Abdul Qadir Jilani and Junayd selectively, like the Shia try to use Ja'far al-Sadiq selectively, to try to cover up a madhab which is not their belief, which really is like that. And the only way you can tell this is by having, rigorous research. It becomes clear to you the truth of that.
No one attacks Imam Tahawi on his Aqidah.
No, people criticize, I said, certain issues in his Aqidah concerning those issues of Iman. They criticized him concerning that. Even these works of Aqidah, right? When we say Aqidah Tahawiyah, right? It is an expression by Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi concerning what the faith of Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah is. It is not the Quran sent down by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not the words of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that he errs in this is not something difficult. So we take the Aqidah from the Ijma' of Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah. We see there are certain issues in which they gathered upon, and we don't know a difference upon them. And the Ijma' is the Hujjah, but it's not because Ibn Taymiyyah wrote Al-Aqidah al-Wasitiyah, or Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi wrote this Risala, or As-Sabuni, the old Sabuni, not the Sabuni today, wrote a book, and so forth. That itself is not the Hujjah. That itself is not the Hujjah. The Hujjah is in what they gathered upon. And that's why Ibn Taymiyyah, in the debate that I mentioned to you, right? The scholar of Damascus, unlike the ruler of Damascus, unlike the ruler of Egypt, was basically, he liked Ibn Taymiyyah. He was like the vice president, he didn't have that type of thing. So he wanted to end the debate and he wanted to protect Ibn Taymiyyah. So what he said, okay, let's just agree that this is the Aqidah of Imam Ahmed. In other words, it's recognized in this country that there are 4 methods which you can follow: Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, or Hanbali. And this is the Aqidah of Ahmed. So you wrote what your method is, and therefore it is, okay, we just end the story and let's get up and go. No, he didn't say. Ahmed ibn Taymiyyah got very angry. He said, this is not my Aqidah, nor the Aqidah of Ahmed ibn Hanbal, or anybody else has the right to write an Aqidah. This is the Aqidah of the Prophet ﷺ. And I challenge you, all those Ash'ari scholars who I gathered for them, that you produce, in the next 3 years, or 7 years, he said, any statement from the earliest 300 years of Islam, whether the person was a Shafi'i, or Maliki, or Hanbali, or Hanafi, or Sufi, or Ahl Hadith, that brings a single word to show me that they went against what I wrote in Al-Aqidah al-Wasitiyah. And the challenge came, and the 3 or 7 years have passed. Indeed, now, he wrote that debate was in 705, and now we're in 1414, so 709 years have passed, and they have been unable to respond. Because this type of belief was something which was agreed upon. But as far as Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, there are certain sentences in that creed which goes against the belief of Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah. And I think that if you look at, Suhail Hassan, Dr. Suhail Hassan, he translated a small gloss of Ibn Baz upon Al-Aqidah al-Tahawi, where Ibn Baz points out some of these issues. I saw it in English language. It's printed in Jeddah, I think. And perhaps I can help identify for you some of the issues in which Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi said to have deviated from the consensus of Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah concerning some of those points of Aqidah. Also, there's another point just for the benefit of the brothers and sisters. The matters of Aqidah are 2 types. There are those matters of Aqidah which we do not tolerate differences in. There's those matters of Aqidah which differences are permissible. And the Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah has disagreed concerning that. Like what was created first, the throne or the pen. Okay, Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah has 2 opinions concerning this. So, if somebody says the throne, because of some evidence, somebody says the pen, this is not considered from the fundamentals of the Aqidah, in which the person who goes against it goes astray. And like last year in August when we did Aqidah al-Wasitiyah, I mentioned another issue, that who is the 3rd best in the Ummah, Uthman or Ali? There are 3 opinions for Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah. Some say Uthman, some say Ali, and some say they're silent concerning the issue. They don't want to say this or that. So this Ibn Taymiyyah says this is not an issue in which the person who goes against the correct opinion, which is that Uthman is better than Ali, goes astray upon. But if you say that Ali is better than Abu Bakr or Umar. You're astray. There's no difference of opinion. So I'm trying to say the matters of Aqidah themselves are not all of the same level. Sometimes differences in some of the matters of Aqidah is acceptable because they're based upon ijtihad, and Allah knows best. Follow this question? There are some brothers who I don't understand the question, but what's the specific example? But the questioner says that there are some brothers, let's just say some people who might be doing some good in calling the people to Islam, but they have mistaken beliefs. And he gives an example which I don't understand. What is to be our approach toward these people? Do we expose them or hide their faults, or just rectify their wrong beliefs to the people? And we do all of that, in the sense that, as I said, that Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah, they follow the truth and show mercy towards the creation. So in that which they do good, we say this is correct. You see what I'm saying? For instance, let us say a person, he has wrong beliefs. He doesn't believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is upon his throne, okay? But yet he's building a message for the Muslims. Do we say, no, don't assist him in building a message for the Muslims? Oh, this is something from the Sharia. We agree to this point. But when he says that Allah is not upon his throne, that Allah is everywhere, we stand up and we say that this is incorrect belief. And we expose it. And it depends upon the degree of deviation, our stance. If the deviation is great, you see what I'm saying, that it tantamount to disbelief, or it's one of those severe bid'ahs, then we have to be very harsh, okay? And if the deviation is not to that degree, and it's because the person is ignorant or hasn't had a chance to be taught, then we don't take as harsh a stance. But we still expose the truth. As I said, that these characteristics, we mentioned 7 of them, can all be summarized in the statement of Ibn Taymiyyah. We follow the truth, and we show mercy toward the creation. And part of showing mercy toward the creation is not to let them go astray. So you expose the wrong. That's part of following the truth. And likewise, part of showing the mercy to the creation is that you do not take an issue which, for instance, let's say we were in an Islamic state and somebody stole something. Could we cut his neck? No. But to cut his hand is to show mercy towards the creation, because you stop sinfulness. And also you show mercy towards him, because by removing his hand, you're also removing the punishment of theft from him, that he won't be asked on the day of judgment. As Prophet said in the hadith of Abu Dawud and elsewhere, that it will be expiation for him. Okay? But at the same time, we show mercy towards him. We do not, mutilate his body when we cut his hand. We do not beat him. We're forbidden to beat him. We do not execute him. We do not insult him. So the point is that the only way you can know the details of this concerning a special issue is by having knowledge, any specific issue. And knowledge is only gained from the scholar. And if you do not know, you have to ask the knowledgeable. You have to ask, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you do not know. And Allah knows that. No, as regards to books translated in English, there are some classical works, such as a Tabari translation of, I guess his tafsir, he mentions Ayah 109 of Surah Al-Baqarah. I'm not certain what the point is in the translation. Or, Al-Zahabi's major sins, and they contain some weak hadith, which we are not clear on, then what should be our attitude regarding these works? Obviously books like Ibn Jarir Tabari's tafsir, or Kitab al-Kibar by Imam Zahabi are recognized by the Muslims throughout the centuries to be classical works which are beneficial to the souls of mankind and represent the true faith of Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah and their practice. But as Imam Shafi'i said, Ab Allah and yutim kitab illa kitaba, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has refused that any book would be perfect except for his book. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to make the Quran stand out from all other works, he made it perfect, that no fault would be in it. But the works of mankind have to have some fault in it. And that fault can be in different ways. It can be grammatical error that most of us would not recognize. It can be in terms of arrangement, that it would better be to have put this sentence before this sentence. Or it can be a mistake, he quotes a weak hadith, or he misinterprets a point, or comes to a wrong conclusion, and different types of errors can occur. But those books which are recognized by Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah to be good, we should read and we should learn from. However, the question comes to translation. Is the translation of that work accurate to the intent of the scholar? For us who do not read Arabic and cannot read the original book. In this case, we need to ask those brothers who are knowledgeable of the Sharia, whether they're scholars or students of knowledge, and then therefore they have maybe a familiarity with the original book and familiarity with the translation. They can say, well, this translation is good, or this translation is too far from it. No one knows this. Now, so there's a question here asked concerning taqwa and iman, and the meaning between those two. Are they similar or are they distinct in meaning? If taqwa is mentioned by itself in a verse in the Quran, it is inclusive of the whole religion, just like Iman. If Iman is mentioned by itself, it's inclusive of the whole religion. There is a distinction between the two without doubt, but in the sense that it refers to the whole religion. So if taqwa is mentioned by itself in a verse or a hadith, like fear Allah wherever you are. Okay? In this hadith, only taqwa is mentioned. The issue of Iman is not mentioned in this sentence, the hadith. So here, taqwa doesn't just mean staying away from the forbidden things. It also means doing the good deeds. And it also means it doesn't just mean actions, it means belief, so it's comprehensive. And likewise, Iman. Iman, when it's mentioned by itself in an ayah or hadith, is comprehensive. However, though, when Iman is mentioned with Islam, Iman becomes to the matters of the heart, from its beliefs, its statements, and its actions, and Islam becomes to the matters, the issues of the outer limbs, from statements and actions. And taqwa, when it's mentioned with al-birr, together, joined in an ayah or in a hadith, taqwa becomes a term for staying away from the forbidden, and then birr becomes a term for doing what is commanded. So it depends upon the context in which it's used. So sometimes they're close in meaning, and sometimes they're distinct. No one is. Okay, then brother says, assalamu alaikum, sister alaikum salam. Someone, is originally against the way of the Salaf, but then refutes, then repents from that, and he then still says some strange things with strange evidences or statements which you feel are not. What should your position be towards that person? You know that in the Sharia we judge people by what they outwardly appear with. Okay, somebody says that he's following the rule is that whenever somebody says something or somebody does something, we always carry his words to the best meaning, and we always assume that his intention is a honest intention. For instance, somebody wants to do something amongst us. Do we assume that he wants to split from the ranks of the Muslims? No. We assume that his intention is good. And likewise, if he says something which we feel shaky about, doesn't seem to really click with us, it seems that there's some problem with his statement, do we assume that he intended something evil? No, we try to take his words and construe it in the best manner. Except for those people who are known to us to be deviant or sinful. Then we do not bend over backwards and try to construe a good meaning to their words or try to add a good intention to their and a good motivation to their actions. Okay, so if this person has made tawbah and hasn't shown anything which is really, clear, that he's not being a hypocrite and he wants to harm those brothers or sisters who want to follow the message, then you should try to construe his words in the best manner. You have to understand that tawbah is in degrees, and that also with a person's tawbah, he also has a process of education and learning. You see, a lot of times we carry the baggage of what we were upon before with us, and that's why the Salaf used to say it is from the good fortune of a young man or a non-Arab. A young man means also a young woman, that Allah guides them to a scholar of Ahlus-Sunnah. And they would always say that if you see a young man or woman, when he first is, becoming religious and so forth, with Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah, then wish well for him. And if you find him with Ahlul Bid'ah, then feel despair for him. Because usually you're upon what you are first start with. Usually, not always. So the point is that, look at Abu Hassan Ash'ari, this great scholar of Islam, who fought in the last part of his life to defend the correct aqidah, and said in his book Al-Imana, I am upon the aqidah of Imam Ahmed and so forth. Yet still, upon further investigation, we find that even in the latter stage of his life, Abu Hassan Ash'ari, rahmatullah alayhi, was agreeing with the Ahlul Hadith only in the major issues. But in the specifics of those details, he didn't have enough opportunity to learn their statements concerning that. So he still carried the baggage of Ahlul Kalam with him. So even though in the major issues he was able to identify the correct opinions with him, in the specific details, he didn't have a chance. And so therefore he was still, you find some things which are not really upon the way of Ahlul Hadith. So if this is Abu Hassan Ash'ari, then what about this one of us, who Allah guides to repentance over? How much time would it take for us to learn and so forth? So my nasiha is that, you be patient with your brothers and sisters and encourage them and, try to teach them. And if they make a mistake, correct them in what is best, and know that it takes time for a person to change. And inshallah ta'ala, there's good in all people. We hope the best for them. No one knows best. Okay. From IT. Who's IT? Oh, maybe Ibn Taymiyyah. Okay. Okay, from Ibn Taymiyyah's statement, if I do not believe in the ilm, then I will be a kafir. This is implying that to a certain extent, ignorance is better than having knowledge, and is that knowledge which is sought one knows that he will not act according to that knowledge in the time being. No, it doesn't imply that whatsoever. Ignorance is always worse than knowledge. Okay, Allah in the Quran says, those equal those who know and those who do not know. So those who are knowledgeable are always better. Okay, those who are ignorant have the danger that their ignorance might not be excused because they might not have put enough effort to learn. You see what I'm saying? I mean, yes, as a principle of Sharia, we will not apply a punishment upon somebody. We will not call somebody a kafir or a fasiq or a mubtadi' unless he has knowledge, right? But let's say he dies upon that state. Are you certain that he's excused? He might have been negligent, and therefore we punish for his negligence. So ignorance is never better than knowledge. And likewise, if you have knowledge and you don't act upon your knowledge, even though that's sinful, since you have knowledge, there's hope that you will repent. And the person who's ignorant, he might not repent because he doesn't know the importance of repentance. And I'll give you an example. A brother who is trying to be religious and so forth. And as he's becoming religious, his character is not balanced, in the sense that he does some things a little bit too extreme and he's negligent of other matters and so on. But he's trying to go in the right direction. And there's another brother who does not know anything. Okay? Who would you feel that in the long run has a better chance of being upright fully? One who knows. Because he's starting, and he has some knowledge, and therefore he just needs to be fine-tuned to act upon what he knows, or to have some moderation in his behavior. But the one who does not know, you have to first encourage him, and start up his heart, so that he will seek Allah in the last, the final abode. And Allah knows best. So you have a question which is being written out. This means I answer for 10 minutes, or I only have 10 minutes? Oh, okay. I thought you wanted me to answer for 10 minutes for the question. Okay, fair enough. Ahlus-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, it's not his question. Ahlus-Sunnah wal Jama'ah are supposed to unite the Muslim Ummah. So what should be done to the leaders who disunite the Muslims by implementing non-Islamic law? How can you gain knowledge from scholars who supposedly work for non-Islamic governments? Shaykh ibn Baz, Allahu Akbar. I am ignorant and want to seek knowledge, so please do not take offense. Please answer both questions as I feel they are both very important. Yes, I mean, there is no harm in asking questions. And, by Allah, we're all here to learn from one another. I am not a shaykh or a scholar to dictate to you. I am here, your brother, and I've come to learn from you, that I may benefit from you. And also, inshallah ta'ala, if I have something to offer to you, we can benefit. You can benefit from what that is. And there's no harm in asking any question, so long as we are seeking, by that question, to resolve the truth. You see what I'm saying? I mean, in the sense that if we're just asking a question just to annoy the speaker, in the sense that any person knows that I have a love for Shaykh Abdul Aziz bin Baz, and how can I not love him? He's Imam Ahlus-Sunnah in our time. But suppose that, he just says this just to, agitate me and so forth, not to seek the truth, and this is a question which I won't answer. But if the question, as the author wrote, that he wants to seek the truth, and there's no problem, we can sit and we can discuss the issue at length, whether it's in the time I have left or afterwards, as long as until that person is satisfied. Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah is supposed to unite the Ummah. So what should be done with those leaders to disunite the Muslims by implementing non-Islamic laws? Those leaders are supposed to be removed by the Sharia. I mean, if you mean those secular leaders who put forward a law over the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are apostates. And they have to be removed even by force of arms. This is one of the principles of our aqidah. However, though, there are conditions in the sense that one cannot revolt if that revolt results in more harm to the Muslims. Okay? I'll give you an example. One of the Muslims in Syria, somebody might disagree with me in my analogy, that's okay. But when the Muslims in Syria in 1982 revolted against Hafiz Assad, who's in Syria? He's a kafir. Okay, he's a kafir not because I'm calling him a kafir, because of the ulama of Muslims like Ibn Baz has called him a kafir. Because he believes that Ali is Allah, he identifies Allah with Ali, and also because obviously he's a secularist, he's a socialist, he is a Baptist, okay, fighting Islam and the Muslims. And the harm he's caused the Ummah cannot be summarized as long as we talk. Now, when they tried to do that, the revolt failed. Okay? And also, in the end, they were forced in a compromising position where they went and they tried to make a pact with Saddam Hussein, who was another Ba'athi, disbeliever, an apostate, against Hafiz Assad. So they put their hands, they tried to fight one Ba'athist and put their hands in another Ba'athist. Why? Because they didn't seek the methodology the Prophet removing these rulers. It is required, as Ibn Kathir puts in his tafsir, that when the rulers replace the Sharia, like Genghis Khan did, with a law of their own making, and they become now apostates, that it's required to remove them by force of arms, immediately. But when the Muslims are too weak, and the people who want to adhere to the Sharia in the country are just a few boys, young men, how can they remove a modern state with all its tanks and its armies and its planes? So here the complaint is not concerning the necessity of removing these criminals and gangsters. The point is that they are unable to remove it. That common sense tells you that they do not have the means to remove these people. And therefore, by them doing it, it will result in a greater evil. What was the greater evil? The city of Hama was destroyed. Thousands of Muslim women were raped. Thousands of people were killed. They destroyed a whole city. They killed the ulama. What benefit did it come? And where is this movement now? After 12 years after the incident, they're unheard of. They just disappeared. In 1982, right after the revolt, I came to England, London, and I visited them and so forth. And they had this little publication called An-Nadir and so forth. What happened to it? It all became dust. Because it wasn't, the way that Ahlus-Sunnah Jama'ah is they take, remember I mentioned that they adhere to the causes, the sunnahs which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts on the earth. Allah in the Quran says, وَعَبْتُ لَهُمْ مَصْطَفَعْتُ مِنْ قُوَّةٍ. Prepare what you can of strength, muster what you can of strength. We know that part of jihad is two types. Jihad in defense of the Muslims, like when Muslims are attacked, like in Kashmir, or Afghanistan, or Eritrea, or the Philippines, and this is a requirement the Muslims defend their Muslim brethren. And there's another type of jihad to spread Islam to the non-Muslim countries, and to subdue them. The greatest aspect of that jihad is to fight the people of the book. I mean, now for the Muslims to send an army to subdue the Christians, from the British or the Americans or the French, is more valuable than to send an army and subdue the Hindus or the Chinese, Buddhists or Confucianists or whatever they are. So why? Because this is greater virtue. And they have a choice. Either they become Muslims and they pay jizya, and they are a state of humility. Now, mashallah, I'm sure all of you are strong men and have much zeal in your heart. Can you now change any one Christian country, even this Monaco, probably the smallest city-state in Europe, or Liechtenstein. Can you? Of course not. Even if you gather all the Salafi and Sunni brothers in the world, you couldn't take over that. So, we need to temper our emotions with a realism of the age we live in, okay? So, Sharia really is something which we believe, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward us upon this. And we have no fear to say it, whether, I could care less now if the Christians were hearing this or not, that Islam came, just like the Prophet ﷺ said to the people of Mecca, that he was sent with a sword. And when the people of Mecca, when he was going around the Kaaba, the Prophet ﷺ, they were making fun of him. And he said, "Ji'tukum bil-dhabh." I've come with slaughter for you. And each of the pagans of Mecca, Abu Jahl and his gang, were afraid. And the hadith describes it as if a bird landed on their head. They became still. And they said, "In Saraf Rashidin ya Abu Qasim." Go, Abu Qasim in the Prophet's kunya. Go, in peace. Because we were, stupid, to insult you like that. We were facetious, and ignorant to do that. So the Prophet, told them that. Okay? But did he do it in Mecca? No. Allah reveals the verse in Mecca to hold your hands back. Because if the Muslims in Mecca were to try to do something like that, they would have been annihilated. Okay? Likewise, it would have calmed it down in the long term. Likewise, when the Ansar came, in Al-Aqaba, I believe the second time they gave bay'ah to the Prophet ﷺ, they came to him and they said, the Prophet ﷺ met with them secretly because he didn't want the other Arab tribes to know that the Ansar were going to become Muslims and the Prophet ﷺ was going to make hijrah to, inshallah, I have to make this point. So, I can't put myself on fast forward, but just be patient, inshallah. That they didn't want the mushrikeen because it had all the tribes to know that the Prophet ﷺ was planning on going to Medina. So they came to the Prophet ﷺ secretly and they said to the Prophet ﷺ, "If you desire, we will now take over Mecca." You know how they were men? There were just a few of them, 70 of them or so. They said, "Now we will fight all the Arab tribes in Hajj time and take over Mecca." The Prophet ﷺ said, I have not been commanded that. And then when the Prophet ﷺ was on the road to Hijrah, the verse of jihad came saying that it's permitted for those who injustice has been committed that they can fight. You see, it wasn't over. And then finally in the Surah At-Tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, fight all the mushrikeen. Kafa. So the point is, this was in stages. Now if our affairs resemble the stage of weakness, we have to then apply the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ at times of weakness. And those who don't want to apply this guidance cause more harm to the Muslims by their extremism and by their not understanding the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Just like those Muslims who blew up the World Trade Center. You don't know how much harm they caused to us in the United States. And how much the people have, those brothers who are from the Sunnah have been bothered by the kuffar. And likewise, I read an article recently in a magazine concerning a certain group and how the kuffar identified many Muslim groups in the United Kingdom. How much harm are they caused by not having wisdom and knowing when to speak and when not to speak? So my brothers, this is a belief we have, and we'll say this belief on the top of our lungs until Allah takes our soul. But we are men of wisdom, following the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ, not children following their emotions. So we will speak when it's time to speak, and we are silent when it's time to be silent. And we will act when it's time to act, and we will restrain ourselves when it's time to restrain ourselves, following in that the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. I guess that's the second part of the question about Ibn Baz, inshallah, we can come to afterwards. I think time is run out, right? Inshallah, it's time for Salah. Jazakumullah khairan.